All projects generate documents. The larger the project, the more documents. And that provides us with a challenge. The challenge being, how do we manage large volumes of documents efficiently? In Aconex, we assign each document with a type, and this is similar to mail. It helps group similar documents together. Examples of document types include drawing, report, schedule or schedule, manual, specification, and procedure. When we search for documents, we can search by their type, and this makes it much easier to find specific documentation. It also tells us quickly what a document is about. It provides purpose and meaning. If we struggle to understand what a document actually is or its purpose, we're going to struggle to get anything done. Document types help us manage documents and documentation more easily. They help us avoid mistakes and delays. Here's a stat. In construction, over a third of each week is spent on non-productive activities, and that includes conflict resolution and dealing with mistakes and rework. You've probably experienced some of that, and it can be frustrating. Of that 35%, it was estimated that over 5 hours per week was spent looking for information. That's an hour each day wasted. Information is critical to the success of every single project, from the biggest to the smallest. If that information is mismanaged, it can result in delays, penalties, and cost overruns. Let's finish with a summary as to why document types are important. First of all, they allow us to group together similar documents. They help us provide meaning and purpose to our documentation. And finally, they help us find, track, and report on documents more easily. We'll take a look at document reports in another lesson. Putting all your documents in one place is good, as long as you can find them when you need them. Let's reinforce why efficient searching is so important. On Aconex, there are projects that have millions of documents in their document registers. Just pressing search and then scrolling through page after page of results would be painful at best. It's not good enough to find documents eventually. That can result in delays and frustration. We need to make it easier. In another lesson, we looked at document fields. Remember, these are tags we apply to each document that's added to the project. These are the key elements to search for and find documents quickly and efficiently. Let's jump into Aconex to explain more. Using the document fields helps reduce the number of documents displayed in the search results. Let's look at this again. Just hitting search displays a large number of documents. In this example, it's not too bad, but on a real project, that number could be in the tens of thousands, maybe more. We need to make that number smaller and more manageable, and we do that by selecting some criteria from the fields. Here we'll use the discipline and type fields to search for all the mechanical drawings. Starting with mechanical from the discipline field, now the number is smaller. Then we'll select drawing from the type field. Now the number of documents is much smaller, much more manageable. In this way, we can much more efficiently locate the information we're looking for using the fields. Plus, Aconex only allows you to search for the tagged information that actually exists in your document register. And that means you can't search for something that doesn't exist. Of course, each project will be different and the criteria that you search on will vary. Sometimes the documents we're looking for can be tricky to locate, even after we've used the various document fields. Often we might know just part of the document title or description, for example. And that's where the search box can help. In fact, it's one of the most common ways people locate their documents. Let's start with everything in the document register. Remember, this is a very small project compared to some of our projects, as we only have a few hundred results. We'll start off by just using a single keyword, fire. This will search for the word fire across all the document fields. And you can see that this has reduced the number of search results drastically. Let's clear the search and use another keyword. Let's try kitchen. Again, now we've got a much more manageable list of documents. And keep in mind that very common words will likely produce a larger number of search results. And we can also use more than one keyword. We'll use lobby and lounge. Again, this has helped reduce the list of documents. One final search. This time we'll use keywords with the document fields. Let's use the document type field to display shop drawings and use lobby as a keyword. Now we have just a few documents. That's much easier to manage. It doesn't take much practice to become good at searching for documents, and once you know how, finding what you need when you need it is so easy. Document fields are used to tag our documents with additional information, but they only work if they're used properly. Let's explain. It's good practice to ensure that each document added to the Aconex project is tagged correctly. That means adding or entering information into the document fields. There are some fields or tags that are standard on every project. Then, some projects add more fields depending on how they want to tag and classify their documents. More fields means more tagging, so we always recommend using only the fields you need to. These are the fields that every project must use. The exception is the discipline field, but we'll explain more about that next. Let's look at these fields in more detail. The document number is the only field that must be unique within a project. And this ensures that each document has its own unique reference or identifier. For drawings, this is easier as they'll all have a number or reference. But for other documents, this can be a bit trickier. We'll discuss that more in the video about document classification. This field is always on, meaning that it can't be switched off, and it's always mandatory, and that means you cannot leave the field empty. It's a text field that you can type anything into. Then we have revision. There are many ways to record this: letters, numbers, or combinations of both. As long as the information in Aconex matches what's on the actual document or file, that's what's most important. This field is always on and always mandatory, and it's a text field. Next is title. This should provide a common sense description of the document. For other documents, this may be the title on the cover page or just a description people typically use. For example, design team meeting minutes. This field is always on, but can be made optional, and that means that it can be left blank. We strongly recommend this is always made mandatory, otherwise you'll end up with documents that have no title or description, and that will make it much harder to find and identify documents. It's also a text field. Then there is the document type. This is used to identify what the document is at a very basic level. A drawing, a report, or a specification, for example. Keeping this list of document types as simple and as short as possible is a key factor in successful information management. This field is always on and always mandatory. It's a single select list field, which means you can only pick from a predefined list of values, and these are controlled by the project administrator. The document status is used to indicate where the document is in its life cycle. So, it may begin as a draft document and then move through various stages or phases. Used correctly, this field allows us to track a document efficiently. And this field is always on but can be made optional, and it's a single select list. There's one other field that is used on virtually every project, and that's discipline. This is something that most project teams tend to use as a way of grouping information outside of Aconex. Disciplines are typically roles like structural, mechanical, and electrical. This field can be switched off, renamed, and made optional. Again, we'd always recommend making this one mandatory if it's being used, and it's also a single select list. You might be thinking, well, you're the experts. Do you have any tips to make managing our information easier? Well, yes, we do. Here are 3 tips for better information management. Number 1. Use only the fields you really need and keep any lists for those fields short and simple. The more fields people have to complete and the bigger the lists they have to pick from, the more likely they'll make mistakes or worse, take shortcuts. The risk here is that documents are not tagged correctly and that makes them much harder to find. Number 2. Remember that old saying, fail to prepare, prepare to fail? Make sure you enter the correct information for each and every field. Yes, this is extra time up front, but you'll be glad you did in the future. There's nothing worse than a register full of documents that haven't got the correct information associated with them. And finally, number 3. Make sure people know what they need to do when working with documents. And this can be a simple one-pager with some examples of how the fields are used on the project. Document fields are not the most interesting of topics, but they are crucial to the success of the project. Finding information eventually should not be the goal. In another video, we covered the basics of searching for documents. Now let's look at how we can customize the search results in the document register. But why would we want to do this? Well, it can be really useful if we need to display more information about the documents when we're listing the search results. Or maybe we want less information that is displayed so we see a simpler set of search results. It's also useful if we need to configure the exact order of the information in the results, for example when we need to generate a report. Let's jump into Aconex and get some search results. One simple option to customize the results is to click a column header to change the order. By default, the documents are sorted by document number, but if we click, say, the size column, it will sort the documents by size. Note the arrow symbol that appears. Initially it's shown pointing up and that indicates an ascending order. In this example, that means the smallest document is shown at the top. If we click the column again, it will change to descending order and show the largest document at the top. The last thing we'll look at is changing the information shown in those results. The Add Remove Columns feature displays all the information available in the register. We can choose what information is shown and the order of that information. And this is great for creating custom reports. Let's see how we can make more use of this. We'll select a couple of columns to remove to make the results less cluttered. You can double-click any item to move it from one side to the other, or use Control to select multiple columns to move. See how that works? The columns are no longer shown in the search results. Now let's add in a column and change the order of the other columns. It's very easy to customize your search results and display the information exactly how you want it. Finally, if you want to use this search again and again, you can save it. These then appear under Saved Searches. And this provides you with a simple one-click option to get results and reports quickly and easily. If you're a document controller or responsible for tracking documents being issued, here's a great tip. It'll save you lots of time when you're trying to figure out if a document has been issued to your company, and if it has, where's the confirmation? Here's the document register. Can you spot the difference? Have a look at that far right column. What we've done is add a column to the search results. The column is called Transmitted In and it will show the transmittal reference if applicable. We cover transmittals in more detail in another video, but for now all you need to know is that this is essentially the confirmation that the document was issued to your company. See the references on the right now? This makes it much easier to see who sent the document and when. Quick recap. Click the column headers to sort by that column or field. Add, remove and change the order of the columns to get the results as you want them. And save the search if you want to use it in future. It's great having all the documents in one place in the document register. always available whenever you need them, wherever you are. But sometimes you might need to get a report of those documents in your register. Here are a couple of examples. You might need to get a list of the latest documents for a status meeting like a project control group or PCG meeting. Maybe your manager has requested you provide a weekly report on what documents have been updated. What if you need to see what drawings have been sent out to other companies on the project? I bet you can think of plenty of other reasons. But whatever the reason, any list of search results can be exported to an Excel spreadsheet and then either adapted further or simply printed off. Let's see how we do this. Here we are in the document register. Let's imagine we need a report for a design team meeting later today. We need to see what architectural drawings have been issued for review. Let's search for them first. We select architectural from the discipline field, drawing from the type field, and then for review from the status field. To get this list of documents into a simple report, we select Reports and then Export to Excel. This will generate the report and place it in the Temporary Files area. There could be a lot of files here depending on what other people are doing, so here's a tip. To only show the reports you've created, check the box Show My Uploads Only. Here it is. Its name includes the date and time it was generated. Then we simply download it. And once you've downloaded the report, you can do anything you need to do with it because it's just a regular Excel document. And remember, this report is up to date at the time you generate it. For a lot of people, reports are not the most exciting of things to create. So, as with a lot of things, a bit of time up front spent preparing the register with some safe searches will make it so much quicker and easier to create reports when you need them. It's important to understand that we don't need to download every document that's in our project because each document is safe and secure in Aconex. So, why download any document? Here are a couple of reasons. Maybe we need to print off a drawing for use on site. Obviously, we'd advocate for reducing paper as much as possible, but sometimes hard copy is what's needed. Or we might be using them as a reference for creating additional documentation. Whatever the reason, here's how you do it. First, we'll need to locate the documents that we want to download. We'll search for electrical shop drawings. There are a couple of ways to open and download a document. The three dots next to each document opens a menu. On that menu, you'll see several options including download. It will prompt you to open or save it, and that's it. The other option is to click the icon next to the document. As before, it will prompt you to open or save it. Easy. It's worth pointing out that when you download a document, you're only taking a copy of the document from Aconex. The original still remains on Aconex. Over time, that document is likely to be updated, and it's important to always check Aconex for the current version rather than relying on the copy you downloaded. Here's a stat. One of the biggest causes of poor project data and information is erroneous or incorrect data. Basically, that means out of date and faulty information. And this is how mistakes are made because people may be working from outdated or old information. Aconex will always contain the most up-to-date versions of documents. We're going to dig a little deeper now and show you how the properties and event log can be useful. Let's remind ourselves about the information associated with documents. Each project on Aconex requires certain document fields are always used and never changed. Each project can also add additional fields to help tag documents specifically relating to that project's requirements. It's up to the project team to decide what information is captured and how it's configured. Here are some documents. We can see certain fields displayed at the top of each column. Remember, we use the Add Remove Columns option to control what information is displayed in the results. There's also other information relating to each document that isn't displayed by default in the search results. To see this information, we click the document's title. This is the document properties screen, and it shows us all the document's information. And this can be really useful when you need more specific information that's not displayed in the results. Let's take a look around. We cover some of the elements here in other videos, so we'll keep it simple. First, we have all the fields for the document here. And remember that not all projects look the same. Then we have the file type and original file name here. Often this is not the same as the document number and title. And this is good to know. When we use the search box in the register, it searches across all information you see on this properties screen. And then finally, we have the document history. We see the current version or revision of the document at the top, but we can click the other versions to see their properties like this. Now we're looking at the very first version of the document. The properties and information in the fields is different. And this is really useful when you need to double check what happened in the past. Everything is tracked. What if we want to see what's been happening to a document in more detail? Well, that's when we use the event log, and you can see the button here. And what we see are all the actions against the document performed by people in our own organisation. It won't show you what other organisations have been doing. And this can come in handy sometimes for seeing who has downloaded or updated a document, for example. And you can filter the results along the top row if this event log is too big. That's it. You probably won't use the properties and event log every day, but they do come in handy sometimes when you need to find out what's happened to a specific document. Classifying documents is probably not something we think about a great deal, but it's important to the success of a project. Different words are used to describe the information stored in the document fields. Criteria, tags, and metadata are common examples. But whatever the term, they allow us to associate additional information to each document. And this is essentially classification. We're using this additional information to group together or classify documents to make them easier to find later. There are some mandatory tags that every project must use, and these ensure a minimum amount of classification for each document. Then each project can add additional fields to meet their own classification requirements. Remember that the more fields you have, the greater the risk of them being used incorrectly. Everyone must make the effort to ensure the relevant information fields are used correctly when uploading a document. Get it wrong and it'll make it difficult to find the document later. Poor classification is the most common cause for not being able to find documents. Here are the fields that are standard across all projects. So it begs a question, doesn't it? Where can we find this information that we use for classifying the documents in Aconex? Let's have a look at a couple of different documents to explain. Starting with a drawing. These form the greatest percentage of total documentation for projects, so it's important to classify them correctly. Drawings almost always have a title block, and this will contain the information you need. Now these title blocks will vary from company to company, but they tend to have the same basic information that we need. With documents, it can get a bit trickier. The most common places to find the details are in the footer of the document. Or maybe the document has a cover page with the information. Now, not all the information is necessarily there, but the important details should be. The last thing we'll discuss is the document number. Now, the document number must be unique within the project and is the one true identifier for a document. Drawings almost always have a number, but other documents may not. And this is something a team should decide on so that everyone knows how to number documents being uploaded to the project. Here are two examples of document numbering conventions. The first one is a simple one, and it uses three parts: organization prefix, a document type, and then a sequential number. A more complex one adds a project ID and a discipline, And this convention is quite typical of those used on larger, more complex projects. Numbering conventions will vary from project to project, but the key to success is knowing what conventions are in use and sticking to them. Ultimately, a single unified convention is best. You now understand that good, consistent classification of documents is important, especially if you want to find them later. But if it's not obvious as to what you should be doing, here are some suggestions. First, check any policy or manuals for the project. These could provide at least basic guidelines as to what is expected. Next, ask the document controller or document control team, or maybe check with the project administrator or other project team members. Unfortunately, it's all too common for everyone to assume that everyone else knows what they need to do when managing the project information. But make the effort to find out what is actually required and help that collaboration on the project run more smoothly. We're diving back into Aconex again, but before we do that, let's do a quick recap of the organisation-centric model and the basics of sharing documents with others. Each company or organisation controls what information they add to their project on Aconex. They also control who sees that information. Nobody gets to see everything. You get to see information that you and your company add, along with information sent to you and your company by others. Everyone controls their own information. Here's an example. An organisation adds or uploads a new document. At that point, only people in that organisation can see it. They'll need to send it to other organisations so they can access it. And this uses a special mail type called transmittal, and we'll look at how that works in another video. For now, we'll focus on getting a single document uploaded into the project. Let's imagine that we have a new document that hasn't been added to the project yet. We select Upload a new document, and this is the information we need to complete before adding the document to the project. We're basically classifying the document. Remember, each project is configured differently, and the information you need to complete may not be the same. The fields shown in yellow are mandatory and must be completed in order to upload the document. Remember to follow any project guidance or requirements. Incorrectly completed information will make the document difficult to locate later, and be careful to avoid spelling errors too. It seems tedious to enter all this information, but you only really do it once. When you update the document later, you'll only change things like the revision and status. Everything else typically remains the same. That document number has to be unique, remember. And the title should never contain information about the revision, status, document or author. That information is added to other fields. Now we'll complete the other information. If you're uncertain what to select from the drop-down lists, make sure you check with someone first. That's all the information entered. Now we have to select a file to upload. You can drag and drop or select a file from your computer. When you're ready, click the Upload button. Once it's uploaded, you're prompted to transmit the document, and we'll cover that in another video too, but it's very simple. For now, let's assume we're not ready to share the new document with other organisations. And here it is in the register. Finally, remember that entering incorrect information will make it difficult to find the document later. It's all about great classification. Uploading documents to a project doesn't make them available to other organisations automatically. We need to send them to others using a transmittal. When you upload a document, you're including a lot of other information about that document using the document fields. The document register manages this information, and when we send documents to other organisations, it's important that this information is maintained. If this didn't happen, we'd have the same document with different information, and that's no way to run a project. Let's explain what a transmittal is and why they're used. When you transmit a document, it registers that document for the organisations you're sending it to, and this ensures that the information is maintained. In turn, this also ensures that the recipients have definitely received the document or documents. Later, if you transmit a new version, the recipients will get the new version but still have access to any previous versions you sent them. And this means you don't have to worry about managing versions. We can also run reports and track transmittals, and we'll take a look at this in another video. This is what a transmittal looks like, just like any other mail. Each transmittal can contain multiple documents. But unlike other document attachments, the transmittal records the basic document information like status and revision. And this comes in handy when you're trying to figure out if a particular document was sent, when it was sent, and its version. That's it. Transmittals are used to send documents to others on a project, and they make sure that any related information is managed and maintained correctly. A key factor for great collaboration is making sure the team have access to the information when they need it. Uploading documents is the first step. The second is to send or transmit those documents to others on the project. Let's take a look at how we do this. First, we'll need to find some documents to send. Let's locate all the architectural drawings that are awaiting approval. And there they are. We have a few here and we don't need to send them all. We'll use the check boxes on the left to select the ones we need. Next, we head up to Transmit and create a transmittal. And this creates a new transmittal and automatically adds the selected documents. At this point, we can also remove documents using the icons on the right. Let's remove the bottom two to demonstrate this. Then we need to add recipients. We'll start by typing the first part of their name and hitting Enter. It's found several Johns on the project, we just need the first one. And then what we'll do is we'll also add our colleague Patrick into the CC list. And then we select a reason for issue. This is common practice and tells the recipients why they're being sent the documents, and this list can be customized by the project administrator. We also have the option here of requesting a response by a certain date. Then we complete the subject and, if necessary, the body of the transmittal. Once we're happy, we click Send. That's it. The documents and transmittal are already with the recipients, so no more missed emails or lost documents. And as with other mail, it's automatically assigned a unique reference. So remember, first we upload the documents, then we make them available to others using a transmittal. We'll cover more mail features in other lessons. In other lessons, we explain that transmittals are used to send or issue documents to other organisations on a project. To help us manage our information, we can track and report on those transmittals. Let's cover the basics of that now. First, we'll need to find some documents to track. Let's locate all the architectural drawings awaiting approval. Say we wanted to see what's happened to the reflected ceiling drawings. We select them first using the check boxes. Then we open the Reports menu. We've got a couple of options here available for transmittals. Let's select the By Document one. This shows us when those documents were sent, if at all, and the related transmittals. In this example, we see the transmittals we received that contained documents. Plus, we also see the transmittal that we sent to others. We can even open the transmittals directly by clicking the relevant link. And note too, there's an Export to Excel option at the top. That's really great if you need a report. Now, whilst we're here, here's a great tip, especially if you're a document controller. Check out the options at the top. By default, this screen shows all documents. But that second option is really useful if you want to see which of the documents you've selected have never been transmitted. It's a really simple way to check if you've forgotten to send documents to others. Now let's head back to the document register. In another lesson, we look at the Add and Remove Columns feature that allows us to customize the information displayed in the search results. Let's see how we can use this feature to show us more information about document transmittals. We'll add in two new columns, transmitted in and transmitted. Now we can easily see if the documents were sent to us by another organisation. We can also see if we have transmitted a document to another organisation. You can even click on the reference or tick to open the transmittal. So that's just a brief look at how you can find out what documents have been sent. But hopefully you'll agree that these simple options allow for easy tracking and reporting, and that always helps with great collaboration and efficient information management. Is it a version or is it a revision? Are they the same thing? It can be confusing. Let's have a look at what this means to us in Aconex. Let's start with this. For the sake of this initial explanation, let's agree there's no real difference between a version and a revision. When we're working with documents, they change over time. They get updated. Here's a really simple example. Early on, a document might be in a draft state. A few people might be contributing to it and working on it, but it's not ready to be used. Basically, it's not finished. Then it will get to a point where we think it's ready to use, but we might need to check it first to make sure. And this is common practice, especially with drawings. We'll call this the review stage. As before, a few people might need to look at the document and check that it's ready. They might look for errors, typos, that sort of thing. And this can result in the document being returned to the creator for amendments. For drawings, that can be a complicated and lengthy process. But let's assume all is good and the document is ready to use. At that point, we can issue it to the relevant people on the project, and we do that with a transmittal. Once issued, it may need further amendments, and that means more updates. So, back to the question at the start. Is it a version or is it a revision? Some organisations and document controllers may have specific definitions that differentiate between a version and a revision. Let's explain. It's not uncommon to use the term revision for minor changes to a document, so we might start with version 1, but each minor change is recorded as a revision. 1.1, 1.2 and so on. Often, this might be an internal way of tracking updates. Then, at some point, the document goes through a major change, and then this changes the document to version 2. And then minor updates continue as revisions 2.1, 2.2 and so on. Essentially, we're looking at a minor revision and a major version. You may not see this too often except on larger projects. So, back to Aconex. Aconex does record the version, and this changes each time an amendment is made to the document or its details. It's automatic and can't be changed. The version is always numeric, and it's incremented up each time the document is changed or updated. The revision is entered when you upload or update a document. It's typically what we see on the actual document, for example in a drawing's title block. A revision can be numeric, letters, or a combination of both. Whatever convention you or your team decide on, just make sure it matches the revision or version on the document. In Aconex, when we update documents with newer versions or revisions, we use a feature called supersede. It's an important feature to understand. As we explain in other lessons, documents go through various changes and stages. On a construction project, that creates a risk. and that risk is working with old or out-of-date information. Globally, it's estimated that over 50% of rework is caused by poor data and miscommunication. That was valued at $280 billion globally in 2018. Even for a relatively small market like Australia and New Zealand, the cost of rework is huge. We must make sure that documents are updated when they should be and update them correctly. Here's the key thing to remember. When you add a document for the very first time, you simply upload it. Then, when the next revision or version of the document is ready, we supersede the original document. What we end up with is a single instance of each document that contains multiple versions or revisions. We upload a brand new document, then we supersede it with the next version, and that old version is not lost but instead remains available, and we'll take a look at that in another lesson. Then we supersede it again, and so on. But enough talking, let's show you how this works. Here we are in the document register again, and let's imagine some time has passed and the document that we added previously has been updated. Now we need to supersede the current version of that document with the new version. Let's locate the document. Then we click on the three dots and select Supersede. We now see all the information for the current document. What we need to do is decide what needs changing. Generally, it's a good idea not to change anything unless it's required, as it may cause confusion for the project team. For example, changing the title of a document could be extremely confusing. But obviously, if we spot a mistake, we should correct it. But for now, we'll alter just the revision from C to D. Often, the status will need changing too, depending on what has happened to the document. But for now, we'll leave it as is. The only other thing we'll change here is the revision date. And this field is not on every project, but if it is, it's good practice to ensure it's correct. Make sure it matches the actual revision date for the document being updated. One other field that is often enabled on projects is the comments field. And this allows you to add some notes as to why the document has been changed or updated. And that's all part of good document control, and it helps others understand what changes have been made to the document. When we're done, we choose the new document and we click Supersede Document. We then have the option of transmitting it, and remember, no other organisation has access to this new revision until we do this. So, remember, when you add a document for the very first time, you upload it. Then, when the next revision or version of the document is ready, you supersede the original document, and that maintains the document history correctly. In other lessons, we cover how to upload new documents and supersede or update existing ones. Let's take a look at how we find older documents, and that is those that have been superseded or updated. Here are some documents. By default, the list of documents shown are always the latest revisions. But what if we want to find a previous revision? Well, it's really easy. But first we'll search for a specific document number so that we only have one document, and that will make it easier to understand what we're doing. So here's the document. We can see the revision, and remembering that this may be a letter or a number or a combination of both depending on the convention that's being used by the project. There's a checkbox labelled Show Document History. We'll check that and search again. Now we see more than one document. But what we're actually looking at are the different revisions or versions of the same document. And this is essentially the history for the document. Each time the document has been superseded, we see a separate revision or version. And sometimes the revision changes, and the status too. We can open or download any of these revisions, and that's one of the benefits of Aconex. It keeps all the versions of a document in one place, and it's really easy to see what's happened to a document over any given period of time. Notice this document that's shown in bold, and that's the current version or revision. and it's the one we previously saw before we checked the Show Document History box. It's shown in bold to make it easy to spot. As with any other set of search results, we can add additional columns, sort them, and export the results to an Excel report.